Noble ones, do we live in reality? What is real? And most importantly, are you all Muppets? Now, the video in question that we're going to review today, this one. So Alex OConnor, run over or double it and give it to the next person. Is of course about logical paradoxes and the most moral choice given really what could be considered almost an impossible situation. What would you do? What would you do? I think it's a very well put together video. But really the core of what we are discussing today is the following. For the few of you that don't know who Alex OConnor is, it's like Alex OConnor is a very famous, popular content creator. He has 524 videos, almost 1.5 million subscribers. And as he describes himself, he says, "Hi, I'm Alex OConnor. I host the Within Reason podcast featuring guests including Richard Dawkins, Rainn Wilson, Sam Harris, and Neil deGrasse Tyson." And he, of course, has a presence in all sorts of social media platforms. Now, one thing that I want to say before I open a Photoshop thing that I prepared just to show you exactly where me and Alex OConnor stand, I want to say this. Alex OConnor is famous for not only having conversations with all sorts of thinkers, but also specifically for debating Christians and Christianity. I want to say this. To introduce Alex OConnor, to those of you who don't know anything about him, I would describe Alex OConnor as a very intelligent, very articulate, and quite fair content creator. I like him very much. Me and him are on opposite positions, since he's an atheist and I'm a Christian. I disagree at a fundamental level with his positions and ideas, which is the reason why I'm making this video today. The video that we're going to discuss together, this one here, is really based on these paradoxes. And they are really a situation where your ability to make a choice in an impossible situation kind of defines your morality or your approach to morality. Now, having established that Alex and I come from two completely opposite foundations for our morality, me being a Christian, I think morality comes from God. Him being an atheist, I don't want to put words in his mouth. It would be great if he could define it. I didn't have much time to find a specific definition, but I think we can all agree, and it's safe to say without risking to strawmanning the man, that he believes that morality is fundamentally a man-made construct born within the mind of human beings. Now, whether or not he considers that as a natural, maybe some beneficial evolutionary trait, I don't know how he describes it, so I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think we can be safe and say that he believes that morality is born within us, whereas my position is that morality comes directly from God. And of course, I respect you guys, whatever idea you have. But what I think is interesting in this scenario is, considering the fact that we find the roots of our personal morality in completely opposite positions, what happens if we both watch an impossible situation? Would we come to the same conclusion? In other words, is there a tether between the morality that a religious person has or the morality that a non-religious person has? Or are we going to experience a fundamentally different and, in fact, even maybe opposite decision when it comes to a choice like this? All right, so just so we're clear where we're at. If we were to create a diagram like the one that I presented here and say for a moment that on this side of the spectrum we've got atheism, and on the other side of the spectrum for this discussion we've got Christianity. I hope I didn't misspell anything. I don't think I did. And let's imagine for a second that we have someone who is indecisive. Okay? So we've got someone in the middle. This could be you. Maybe it could be one of you. In fact, let me know. He's not an atheist. He's not a Christian. He doesn't know. He hasn't made up his mind necessarily. In this spectrum, this line represents not only where you stand when it comes to are you a Christian or are you an atheist, but it could also represent, depending how further to the polar end we go, how tolerant or intolerant you are, aka how combative you are with the opposite side. Okay? So let's imagine for a second, for the sake of argument, here we've got, imagine some kind, I couldn't think of someone famous, so just put someone here. On the very end, this man is a Christian, but he's one of those Christians. He says that you cannot be moral if you're not a Christian. Next item of discussion would be the likes of Richard Dawkins. He describes himself as a militant atheist. So the type of atheist that absolutely despises Christianity, Christian doctrine, religion in general, we could say, but although he does appreciate the art and cultural manifestations that come through religion. He does say that, but he has said that he thinks that the Bible or the idea of Christ sacrificing to him is abhorrent. He has said that. Okay, so I think it's fine to put him here because he's an atheist, and also he is a militant atheist. Now, let's place me and Alex. So I would put Alex here, and I would put myself here. What does this mean? Well, Alex OConnor is, by his own definition, a non-combative atheist. So, differently from any person that you want to put here, he doesn't seem to be interested in insulting people. He is an atheist. He absolutely goes here. Maybe there are on some aspects, like for instance, life after death, I believe he said he's agnostic. But in general, I would put him here in the atheism section. But he's definitely someone who doesn't appear to hate Christians and is very happy to sit down and have a conversation with a Christian. Likewise, and this is the bottom line of this discussion, the reason why I've chosen him over him in this scenario is because I am exactly his polar opposite. Exactly his polar opposite. So I am a non-combative Christian. I am a Christian who is willing to sit down and discuss with an atheist over a coffee, talk about differences. I don't hate atheists. I'm not going to start an attack you, scream at you or anything like that. That's me. What I want to underline is that by placing myself here, this has only to do, the horizontal line is not a representation of conviction, because if this was a representation of conviction, I would have put myself at the very end here, because I am convinced that there is a God and convinced that Christ is King and Lord. This is not a position that I'm putting. So I'm just to be sure that I'm not like, yeah, maybe there is absolute. That's not me. I will be at the end. But this line here only represents your attitude towards the other side, just to make sure that we know where we stand. That's why I think this would be a good situation. We are on polar opposites, and that's why I want to see if we come to different conclusions when presented with impossible odds from a moral perspective.
Would you kill one person or double it and give it to the next person? Okay, on first thought, the answer seems obvious. Double it and give it to the next person. That person will get to decide whether to kill 2 people or give it to the next person. If they choose the next person, that person will choose between 4 people, or the next person 8 people, then the next person. And so if everybody just keeps passing it on to the next person, as long as there's no end to this, presumably nobody has to die. But it on to the next person, as long as there's no end to this, presumably nobody has to die. But we have to be rational here. Human beings are not perfectly moral, and especially if this does go on infinitely, which we're just going to park some of the laws of physics in order to allow for that to happen. Given an infinite amount of time, anything that could possibly happen is guaranteed to happen. Right. If this genuinely goes on forever without end, then as long as it's possible for at least one person to pull that lever, it's guaranteed to happen at some point. Okay,
so this already, before he actually says his conclusion, if we remove the laws of physics for a moment and we say this will, we know, we are here, I'm here, you are here, and we are told this will continue forever. If this will continue forever, it means that categorically, eventually, mathematically speaking, someone will pull that lever. At that point, I would say pull the lever. Because if this continues forever and you pull the lever, you only have one victim. It's a horrible thing, but I mean, you have been placed in an impossible situation. But if you don't pull the lever, you are specifically ensuring that the train may, in fact, off potentially millions. Millions. So from a morality perspective, if you don't pull the lever, you are tangentially causing the deaths of a potentially infinite number of people. So, yeah, I think I would say I really would do anything I can to not be put in this position. But saying that there is nothing I can do about it, logically would make sense to do this in this scenario.
Or at least one person to pull that lever, it's guaranteed to happen at some point. Yes. So some number of people are getting killed here, but you are in quite a unique position. You are the only person in this entire scenario who can guarantee that the fewest number of people possible end up dying by pulling...
Fascinating. Fascinating.
the lever, killing that one person, and ending the trolley problem right there. So weirdly, even though it seems like you're choosing between definitely killing one person or the potential to kill nobody, you're actually guaranteed to kill some amount of people if you pass it on to the next person. Because
of course, this only works in the infinite scenario, which isn't logically possible, but this is an hypothetical, and within the rules that have been stated for the discussion of this hypothetical, I'm in agreement.
Because if this does go on infinitely, somebody is going to pull the lever. However, of course, if we switch the laws of physics back on again, we can recognize that this will not, in fact, go on forever. And so my only question would be, when does this end? Like, is it...
I think it's more interesting now, because the previous version, when he's like, if this is going to continue infinitely, kind of gives us the answer already. I think that's the best answer. The only thing that I can see is someone saying, well, I don't want to be the responsible, and therefore I'm kind of washing my hands out of it. But indirectly, you would only be hiding from the truth that you still, with your choose for inaction, you still have caused, and the death on, in fact, a potentially enormous amount of people. And so you would only be deluding yourself in that scenario. And therefore, I think at that point, you would have to make the hard choice. That's it, from a moral perspective. Now he has shifted the scenario, the rules have changed, and therefore, if the rules of engagement change with any thought process, then we need to see if the logics still work, or if our morality now is going to change a little bit, or maybe completely. The dynamics have changed. So now the laws of physics are implemented. This is not infinite. What are the numbers that we are dealing with?
Is it 100 people that you could possibly give this to? In that case, I'd be pretty confident that no one's going to pull the lever and kill the innocent people, because I reckon 100 people have it in them to do the morally correct thing.
Okay, before he continues, I think we would have to look at statistics here. What are the chances? What are the numbers of sociopaths and psychopaths within any given population cluster as a general number? I wonder, because that would be an element of this, not to mention, maybe it's not even necessarily the problem of a sociopath. It could also be a problem that someone could make the wrong mistake within that given 100 people. And by the time, as you were saying, you get to number 10 already or 20, yeah, the risk is still incredible. So you guys say 1%, 3%, maybe even about 5%, Andrew says. 10% says, yeah, I mean, depending on the percentage, that's a massive risk you're taking by rolling that die. So we'll have to say, I don't know, man. Will all those 100 people make the right decision, and so we reach the very end, and then the 100th is not pulling? And you know what really makes this a problem? The numbers, he's got to go into the exponential numbers and actually show us what we're dealing with in terms of potential victims, which still puts me in a scenario where I would be like, I don't want to roll that die.
But wait, I'm not sure about that, because as the number of people increases that could pull the lever, so do the number of victims. And actually, the number of victims are doubling every time. It's exponential, whereas the number of people who could potentially pull the lever are going up linearly. And I think people often don't really understand the power of exponential growth. There's a famous myth about some ruler of India sometime hundreds and hundreds of years ago. I think it might be like the guy who invents chess really impresses this Indian.
What a guy, by the way, the inventor of chess. What a guy.
Years ago. I think it might be like the guy who invents chess really impresses this Indian ruler. And the ruler says, I'll give you a reward because of this wonderful game that you've invented. Anything you like. And all the inventor of the chessboard wanted in return was for the ruler to take one single grain of rice and put it on the first square of the chessboard. Then just double it. Take 2 grains of rice and put it on the second square. Then 4 on the third square and 8 on the fourth.
Yeah, I mean, this is gonna go nuts. What number is it gonna be once you reach this? Millions? Tens of millions? Who the heck knows? This is crazy. You think about it, it doesn't look like much. This is a very good idea, way to describe. I think it's an excellent, in fact, way to describe exponential growth. So 1 becomes 2 is not a big deal. 2 becomes 4 is not a big deal. 4 becomes 8. You're like, oh, still 8. But this is going to continue. And every time is going to double. It's going to go out of hand very quickly. I really hope he shows us the numbers. I am so curious. Let's go.
Square, and so on and so forth. And the ruler thinks, I got off pretty easy there, I can do that. It's just grains of rice. Sure thing, and he agrees. So on the first square, he puts 1 grain of rice. On the second, he puts 2. By the time he gets to the 10th square, there's 512 grains of rice. So still pretty manageable. But believe it or not, by the time you get to square number 20, there need to be 524,288 grains of rice on that square. By the time you get to square number 30, the ruler would need 536,870,912 grains of rice to fulfill his promise. So how many grains of rice would need to be placed on the final square of the chessboard? Square number 64?
Trillions, quintillions.
9 quintillion, 223 quadrillion, 372 trillion, 36 billion, 854 million, 775,808. That's a lot of rice. In fact, that's more grains of rice than there have been seconds since the universe began. So even if this scenario only had 100 potential people, and if you passed it on to 100 people and nobody pulled the lever, the game would just end. Even with only 100 people, if you double the number of victims every time, by the time you got to that 100th person, the number of victims would be, well, it's a number too large to actually say out loud, so I'll just put it on the screen. Yeah.
You got to pull that lever. We're back to square one. Very well argued, by the way. I love the mathematics of it. Good evening, Baron. Insane amount.
If we only got to the 100th person in the chain, if we let this go on to person number 266, the number of victims at that point would be more than the estimated number of atoms in the observable universe. So let's look at some expected value here. Right. Even if the probability that one of those 100 people would pull the lever is incredibly small, because the number of victims involved is so unfathomably large, you have to kind of count these against each other. Such is the power of exponential growth, and such is the reason why I think I would probably just pull the lever at the beginning to get this over with. Okay, so in this one on...
Okay, so do we agree? The way he has explained it, yes, I would say that I would pull the lever, having given all of this, because at the end of the day, by refusing to pull the lever, the potential of not having... I would look at pulling the lever as saving all of the other people. And in that scenario, I'm absolutely pulling the lever. Yeah. So interestingly enough, we have different worldviews, completely different source for our morality and ethics, yet we made the same choice. I want to see if someone disagrees, but to me, that seems fair. Yeah, Nicholas, absolutely. In fact, I think it is your moral responsibility to pull that freaking lever if you have been caught at the beginning. Daniele Fabro says, can't we just stop the trailer? Yeah, I mean, of course, as part of the hypothetical, I'm imagining that that's not possible. If that is even a small, minute possibility, then I think we would try and exhaust that. But if we fail, and then we're back to square one, and we still have to pull that damn lever or not, then I pull the lever, and so would he. What happened to Alex? Yeah, what's wrong with it? I think he's just put some product in it, right? Or do you mean the length? I don't know what you mean by that. Looks like a little bit of gel. When I had short hair, I used to use gel myself.
I would probably just pull the lever at the beginning.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Alex OConnor, for sharing a fascinating, because we've taken time to kind of discuss. But I have to say, I really liked the video. I don't know about you guys, but I thought this was fascinating. And what I kind of expected this, because I know, to me, Alex OConnor seems to be a very decent individual, and I think there are a lot of aspects of morality that overlap, but I didn't know if there was going to be any section of this where the fact that we go at morality and ethics from such a diametrically opposite positioning, then I didn't know if there would be a situation where I was like, no, that's the right thing to do, pull the lever, and he'd be like, no, don't pull the lever. That would have been something that I kind of expected to happen at least once. It never did. So here's my position, and then move chat in front of the screen, we talk. But here's how I personally justify that. Do I think, in my worldview, I think, of course, that morality comes from God. With that being said, I do not believe that atheists cannot be moral without a belief in God. I don't believe that. I know that there are people that do, and I disagree with them within my side of the Christian side. And the reason for that is, once again, this innate conscience that we have. Unfortunately, not everyone has it. There are the sociopaths, but they're usually the exception to the rule, at least when it comes to percentages within any population cluster. And so when it comes to the general public, and in this case, me and him, we both have this conscience. We both feel, oh no, that's the wrong thing to do. I don't want to make someone else suffer. And even though the way I justify that, I think we are equally moral. I don't think that I'm more moral than him because I believe that my morality comes from God and he doesn't. I don't. In fact, for all I know, I don't know him, but maybe if we were to be so transparent on everything, maybe he's more moral than me. That's possible. But what I want to say here is that I still believe, in my worldview, that his morality, even though he doesn't believe that it comes from God, I think that that conscience still comes from God. And it's in fact one of the ways in which we resemble our parent, heavenly parent, because he's the maker. So just like an earthly child looks like his parents, we look like him every time that there is something good about us, because he is the perfect good, is the infinite good. And so that's something that we inherited as his children, because we are divine in a way. And so to me, he can be moral, even though he doesn't believe it, because the fact that he believes or not doesn't change, from my point of view. Some of you don't believe that, but I'm just sharing my point of view. I think he can absolutely be moral because of the fact that he has got this scintillam Dei. He's got this aspect of him that he, as a child of God, inherited. And that's the way I justify it within my belief system. As you noticed, this was just a reaction to the very first paradox that he showed. But then he shows another paradox on this very video that actually has to do with the problem of free will. I will use that and edit it as a second part to this part in order for this video to not be an hour long. But if you enjoyed this and want me to edit and publish the second part, let me know in the comments. Thank you.